Let us discuss about useState React hook. But first, what are React hooks? React hooks were introduced in React 16.8. React hooks are functions that let you hook into React state and lifecycle features. Function components by themselves do not have state or lifecycle features, but if we use React hooks along with function components, then we will be able to use React state and lifecycle features. And another important point is React hooks don't work inside classes. In other words, we can use React hooks only with function components and not with class components. React provides a few built-in hooks like useState, useEffect, etc. We will first discuss useState React hook with the help of a few examples. And as usual, to do these examples, we will need a React application that has been created by the command line tool create React app. If you already have one, you can use that, or you can create it using this command npx create React app followed by the name of the application. Here I'm using app5 as my application name. Once that command completes, cd into that folder, and once you are in that folder, type npm space start. This will start up the development server and open localhost :3000. And also please open that folder in VS Code. So I have done that, and I have also created a couple of subfolders. Under the src folder, I have created a component subfolder, and under the component subfolder, I have created useState_examples subfolder. And I will be putting my examples in this useState_examples folder. Before we start our examples, I want to make a quick point about how to debug code when we use the useState React hook. Please make sure to not use console.log or alert for debugging useState examples. If you place console.log or alert statements after updating state variables, they will typically give the previous values, so it is better to avoid them to debug useState code. And it is better to use React Developer Tools, the browser extension. If you have not installed this browser extension, please do so now. We will discuss why we should not use console.log or alert statements with useState code when we discuss useEffect React hook. Let us look at the UI for the first example. We will be implementing a click counter component. Let's examine the UI. There is a button over here with the label click me, and when the user clicks this button, the message over here should get updated. So when our component loads, it should show you clicked 0 times, and when the user clicks for the first time, it should show you clicked 1 time, and when the user clicks a second time, this number over here should change to 2, and when the user clicks a third time, it should change to 3, and so on. So basically we are counting the number of clicks over here. So let's implement this React component. I'm going to add a new file, and I'm going to call that click counter.js. It is going to be a function component, and so it has to return some JSX. Before going any further, let us quickly discuss a strategy to implement this component. I'm going to use a 3-step strategy for implementing this component. The first step is, while writing JSX for UI, identify things that need to change when user does something. So when the user does something like clicking on a button, etc., if we want a few things to change in the UI, we need to identify those things first. And the second step is, then we have to create state variables for them using useState. And then the third step is write code to modify those state variables. And when state variables are updated, React will take care of updating the HTML DOM. So if we do these 3 steps properly, then React will take care of the final step of updating the HTML DOM. So the first step is identify things that need to change. Then the second step is create state variables for them. And then the third step is write code to modify those state variables. So let's implement a first step over here. Let's write the JSX for implementing this UI. I'm going to place an empty root tag at the top and also close it. We have some text at the top, so let me use a paragraph tag for that. And the text is you clicked 10 times. So we should say you clicked 10 times. And then we have a button with the label click me. So let's write button and let's specify the label click me. And I mentioned here that while writing the JSX for the UI, let us identify things that need to change. And we know that the number over here is what will change when the user clicks on the button. So this will have to be a variable. Let's use count for that and embed it like this. And the second step is create state variables for them using useState. So we need to create a state variable for count now. And the way to do it is we'll write const count comma set count equals useState followed by whatever needs to be the initial value of count. 0 is going to be the initial value, so I have specified 0. In order to use the useState React hook, we need to import it. So let's do that. Import useState from React. Let us examine what we have written over here. Let's go to the docs. The docs say that when we declare a state variable with useState, it returns an array with 2 items. And the first item will be the current value of the state variable, and the second item will be a function that lets us update the state variable. Let's examine this one more time. So when we declare a state variable using useState, we'll get back an array with 2 items. The first item will be the current value of the state variable, and the second item will be a function that lets us update the state variable. So this useState function call over here will return an array with 2 items, and on the left over here we have 2 variables, count and set count, which will get assigned the return value of useState function call over here. Over here we are doing array destructuring, and the names of the variables that we are using are count and set count. Count is the first item and it will give back the current value of the state variable, and set count is the second item and it will be a function that lets us update the state variable. So set count will be a function. Let's do a quick recap about array destructuring. For example, if we write the statement a comma b equals 1 comma 2 like this, then what will happen is pattern matching will happen between the left side of the equals operator and the right side of the equals operator. So the first variable specified over here will be assigned the first element in the array on the right side, and similarly the second variable will be assigned the second element in the array on the right side. So a will be assigned the value 1 and b will be assigned the value 2. Let's verify that. So I'm going to type a and you can see that the value is 1, and let me type b and you can see that the value is 2. And that is exactly what is happening here when we assign count and set count to the result of this useState function call over here. Now let us look at the third step, which is write code to modify those state variables in event handlers. So within our event handler, for the click me button, we need to write code to modify the state variable. So let's do that. Let us implement the event handler for the on click event. When the user clicks on this button, we need to increment this value. So let's write code for that. So I'm going to write on click equals, and I'm going to use handle click as the event handler name. So let's implement handle click now. Const handle click equals, will be past the synthetic event, but we don't need it here, so let's ignore that. And in the function body, we want to increment the value of count by 1 when the user clicks on the button. So instead of doing this, count equals count plus 1. So instead of doing this, what we'll have to do is we'll have to use this function set count that we got back from the useState function call. Only if we use set count to update the state variable, only then will React know that it has to update the DOM related to the state variable. So let's use that. So I'm going to write set count and I'm going to pass in the argument count plus 1. When we use the useState React hook, we need to use the function that it gives us in order to update the state variable. We want count plus 1 to be the new value of the state variable, so we pass it as an argument to setCount method. So remember not to use the assignment operator when updating a state variable, and remember to use the function that useState gave us to update the state variable. If we update the state variables correctly, like we did here using setCount, React will examine the JSX of the function component, and depending on which state variable has changed, it will update the HTML DOM accordingly. For example, the paragraph tag's text depends on the count state variable, so React will update the text within this paragraph tag. Let's export this function component. I'm going to write export default click counter, and let's go to app.js, and in app.js I'm going to remove all of this code from here to here, and I'm going to write click counter over here. VS Code has automatically added the import statement for the click counter component. So let's take a look at the output now. And as you can see here, we have implemented the component as per the UI wireframe. Let's click on the button to see if it works. So I'm going to click it now, and you can see that the value over here has changed from 0 to 1. Let's click again, and you can see that the value has changed from 1 to 2. Let's click again, and the value got incremented to 3 now. Let's click a few times, and we can see that the value is getting incremented correctly. Let us open the React Developer Tools. Select the Components tab over here, which is the React Developer Tools, and make sure to select the click counter component over here. And if you observe here, there is a section called hooks, and the state hook, whose value is 9, is what we have created using useState in this statement. And this value 9 is the current value of the state variable, which is count, which is declared over here and embedded within JSX over here. So this value of 9 comes from the state variable over here. Let's trace the steps that happen when we click on this button. When the button is clicked, the onClick event will be fired, and so the event handler handleClick will be invoked, and within the handleClick event handler, the state variable will be updated. So the value of this state variable will get incremented from 9 to 10, and when the value of a state variable changes, React will enter into the picture and update the HTML DOM. So if this value becomes 10, then React will make sure that this text over here will also be updated to show 10. So always remember that the code that we write will always be with the goal of updating the state variables, and the actual DOM operation of updating the text within this paragraph tag, this text over here, that will be done by React. We have seen how the developer tools help us to observe the values of the state variables as they change. For example, I'm going to click on this button now. If you observe the value over here, as I click this button, you can see that the value keeps getting incremented. As you can imagine, this will be very helpful for debugging. Another nice way to debug our code is by using breakpoints. If you click on this icon over here, we can view the source for this element. That means we can view the source for this component. So let's click that. So I have clicked that now. And now we are able to see the source code of our clickCounter.js component. Also observe that the tab in the developer tools has changed from components to sources now. To create a breakpoint, all we have to do is click on the left side of these line numbers. So I'm going to click to the left side of this line number 8 over here. And when I click that, a breakpoint is set over here. So the control will stop here before executing this line of code over here. So let us click on the button now and see if the control stops at this breakpoint. And I have clicked it. And as you can see, the control stopped over here. This line of code hasn't executed yet. So if we hover over count, we can see that the value is 10. And if we click on the play button over here or here, the execution will resume and complete executing this line of code. So let's do that. So I have clicked that. Let's go to the components tab and look at the state, and we can see that the value has changed to 11. So let's trace what we have done over here. First, I have selected the React Developer Tools, which is the Components tab over here. And once this was open, I selected the click counter component over here. And then we took a look at the useState hook values over here. In this case, we have only one state variable, so we are being shown only one value over here. And then to look at the source code of the component and also to place breakpoints, we clicked on this icon over here, and that opened the clickCounter.js component within the sources tab over here. And we placed a breakpoint by clicking to the left of the line numbers like this. Being able to examine the state values and being able to place breakpoints in the code are powerful debugging techniques that the React Developer Tools gives us. Let's do a quick recap of what we have done in our example. We have used a 3-step strategy for implementing this component. While writing the JSX for the UI, which is this code over here, we identified what needs to change, and we identified that this is something that needs to change here. So we used a variable for that, and as per the second step, we used a variable for the second step, and as per the third step, we used a variable for the third step. So we used a variable for the second step, and as per the third step, we used a variable for the third step. So we used a variable for the second step, and as per the third step, we used a variable for the third step. So we used a variable for the second step, and as per the third step, we used a variable for the third step. So we used a variable for the second step, and as per the second step, we used a variable for the second step. So we used a variable for the second step, and as per the second step, we used a variable for the second step. So we used a variable for the second step, and as per the second step, we used a variable for the second step. So we used a variable for the second step, and as per the second step, we used a variable for the second step. So we used a variable for the second step, and as per the second step, we used a variable for the second step. So we used a variable for the second step, and as per the second step, we used a We created a state variable for that. So count is not a normal variable. We are calling that a state variable, and we used useState to declare that variable. And what is actually happening here is that when we declare a state variable using useState, it returns an array with 2 items, and we have used array destructuring to assign count and set count to those 2 items. And count refers to the first item, which will give us the current value of the state variable, and set count refers to the second item, which is a function that lets us update the state variable. So set count is the function that we have to use to update the state variable. And so we have used that within our event handler over here to update the state variable like this. And that was the third step in our 3-step strategy to modify the state variables in the event handlers. We have to remember not to use the assignment statement using the equals operator to update the state variables. We have to use the method that useState gives us, which is setCount over here. And when we update the state variable correctly, like we did with setCount over here, React will know that it has to update the HTML DOM that depends on the state variable. Before concluding our first example, I want to mention a couple of points about naming conventions. Hooks usually have use as prefix. For example, useState, useEffect, useReducer. These are hooks that React gives us, and you can see that all of them have use as a prefix. And when we assign names to our setter methods, we usually use set as prefix. For example, in this line of code, you can see that the name setCount has set as a prefix. And also a quick side note about event handlers. We usually use handle as a prefix for event handlers. So you can see that handle click over here is our event handler name, and it has the handle prefix. So please keep these naming conventions in mind while you do the examples.